Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Marconi Stallions for round 9 of the 2025 Men's National Premier League. This is your mighty Marconi Stallions FC taking on St George City FA. The starting lineup for your Marconi Stallions is at number 1, James Hilton. Number 2, Simon Bernie. Number 4, Anton Manarich. Number 5, Lachlan Griffiths. And number 6, Don Costanzo. Number 8, James Banks. Your captain. And number 10, Marco Yesic. Number 14, Jake True. Number 17, Xavier Sequez. And number 18, George Daniel. Number 23, Brandon Beller on the bench tonight for your Stallions. Number 3, Cameron Witness. And number 11, Miroslav Popovich. Number 12, Julian Monge. Number 20, Patrick Williams. Number 22, Alexander Vozdanovic. And number 24, Matej Buset. Now for the away team, St George City FA. Number 1, Jack Kennedy. Number 3, Theo DeGoro. Number 7, Nathan Roberts. Number 9, Mark McNulty. Number 10, Paolo Mitchell. Number 11, Yugoslo Kamara. Number 15, Nathan Romano. Number 17, Noah Evans. Number 19, Jesse Potter. Number 23, Dakota Askew. Number 25, Brody Clarkson. On the bench for St George City FA, number 2, Matthew Walton. Number 12, Kai Kamakura. Number 13, Cameron Kemp. Number 16, William Kunis. Number 18, Goncalo Azarelos. And number 24, Zakaria Hamoud. Marconi Stallions FC acknowledges and appreciates the support of its 2025 sponsors. Right employees need expert legal advice. That's what they do. Stratford Refrigeration, Alert Constructions, Peter Warren, Lagina and Marca Football. The 2025 Marconi Stallions home jersey is now available for purchase at the ticket gate, and a limited quantity of our 2024 merchandise is also available at discount prices from Club Marconi Reception. Join us in making a difference. Club Marconi and Biddies are hosting a community car sleep out on Friday, June 13, to support those experiencing homelessness in our community. Scan the QR code around the stadium or visit our website to donate or sign up. Every contribution counts. The Football New South Wales Men's National Premier League competition is proudly sponsored by Ryder, official match ball of the New South Wales NPL. Attendees are reminded they are bound by the Football Australia Spectator Code of Behaviour together with the terms of admission of this venue, and any breaches may result in disciplinary action and sanctions.
A chance to rest atop the perch in NPL New South Wales is on offer at the Palace tonight. Round 9 NPL New South Wales action that sees the reigning champions Marconi play host to St George City, knowing that a win will take them into first position for 24 hours at least. NWS Spirit, the current ladder leaders, still to play tomorrow, so it could be a short-lived time at the top, but it is a massive opportunity tonight for Peter Sekenis' side to pile the pressure on the only other undefeated team in the opening 2 months of the season. And it is an opening 2 months where the Stallions have been solid, while not necessarily at their swashbuckling best. An 87th minute own goal from Ricky Franson saw them past cellar dwellers Western Sydney Wanderers here last week. And as they look to turn the Palace into a fortress, they welcome St George City, a side who are struggling at the minute. Just one win in their last 5 games. Manny Spanadakis' men looking to pick themselves up off the canvas after St George Derby disappointment at the hands of the Saints last week. So it is the Stallions who enter into this contest the stronger, but all 3 points by no means assured. St George City have beaten them twice, 50% of their head-to-head meetings since promotion into the top flight, so expect a close battle here in Bosley Park. Pleasure to have your company for it wherever you may be tuning in from on the NPL New South Wales YouTube page. Lockie Flanagan with you this evening for a very intriguing game as the reigning champions look to really flex their muscle as we get into the meat of the season. No changes from the side that won 1-0 against the Wanderers. There is, however, a change on the bench. Liam Yulee is unavailable. He joins an absentee list that includes Franco Maya and Kyle Chimenti. And so there is a place on the bench for last year's Under-20s Player of the Year, Alex Gvozdenovich. One change for St George City, and it is unfortunately injury enforced, and a big one. Solomon John Monaghan Viker, after going down against St George FC last week and had to be stretchered off the field, is of course unavailable tonight. Replacing him in the starting 11, Jesse Foti, as it is the visiting side, St George City, who get us underway in the red. Marconi wearing the new look sky blue this season. They've ditched the traditional green, a more classic look as they look to recapture the heights of last season. Of course, pipped to the league title by Rockdale last year, but got their revenge, of course, in the big dance. And they are undefeated, of course, so far this season. 5 wins and 3 draws. First home win of the season last week against the Wanderers. Really yet to flex their muscles in an attacking sense, and we know that they've got the quality in them. Just the 11 goals scored so far in season 2025. Albeit aided by a very tight ship. The best defence in the league so far, just 5 goals against. But a long way short of the 79 they scored across the entirety of last season, as that one is knocked away by Grimaldi. Damien Sekenis, the player, giving chase. It'll be a very interesting battle to see those two go head-to-head tonight. Here's James Bayliss. Tyron Burney. This is good passing play. It's brilliant passing play, in fact, from the Stallions. And it is going to bring about the first free kick of the evening's action. Well, one on the left-hand side by Peter Sekenis' team. And free kicks like this are Dominic Costanzo's bread and butter. Of course, it was a Ricky Franson own goal last week, but it was turned in after a corner delivery by this man, Dom Costanzo, who does, I think, try to go for goal and has sent that one, well, not only over the Marconi Stadium scoreboard, but over the fence at the back. It's designed to stop that exact thing from happening. Over the advertising hoardings. And that's Dom Costanzo falling the early victim of the commentator's curse there. That free kick, by no stretch, his best. You do wonder if perhaps the wind might have caught that one. It is pretty blustery here in Bosley Park. Certainly atop the gantry. So that's flicked forward nicely for McNulty. Griffiths able to evade the challenge of Jesse Foti. And a nice ball further afield for Jesic. Easy pickings, though, for Nathan Grimaldi. That one's just looked to have stayed in play initially, but not in the end. Famoto Kamada have to keep a guard of Marco Jesic as Marconi prep their first corner of the evening. James Bayliss to deliver. Side towards the back post. Griffiths had a swing. Nothing doing. This is a really big test for Manny Spanidakis' St. George City tonight. Of course, finals football last year in their sophomore top flight campaign. And tipped by many with the quality of some of their signings, not least two-time Scottish international Mark McNulty to compete for the finals places again, but as it stands, they are a long way short of that, sitting in 13th at the start of the weekend. One win in their last 5, and finding goals a little tricky to come by. They're kindred spirits, these two, in that regard. 10 goals for the campaign City, but 50% of those came in one game. 5-0 winners they were against Sydney FC back in round 3. And just the one win since then, so it does feel, that 5-0 win, like a long time ago. Costanzo. Booming switch, looking for Jake True, who meets the ball and helps it on its way to Tyron Burney. Strong challenge that by Nathan Roberts, but the cross is into the middle anyway. And drop down, Costanzo and Bayliss just got in each other's way in the end. Costanzo fires it over to Daniel. No signs of the offside flag, but catching practice in the end for Jack Kenny, goalkeeper of the month for March. They haven't let too many in, St. George. They've been fairly solid at the back. Jack Kenny, part of the reason why. 30 saves so far in season 2025 for the man who recently ticked past a 50th appearance for City in the NPL. James Hilton looking to restart things. Lachlan Griffiths. He's had a very solid start at the centre of defence since signing from last year's title rivals Rockdale. Fantastic goal. Fantastic header against Sydney United a fortnight ago. Quite the time to grab your first in Marconi colours as Kennis tries to get on the charge. Nothing doing in front of the St. George City back four. Lenaric across and covering well. And the ball stays in play, so space opening up for Dominic Costanzo. And now Jesic. He prods it across. True. Back to Brandon Vella. Plenty of neat passing early doors from the Stallions, even though it may lack end product as yet. Daniel back to Vella, and after some consideration to see whether or not advantage would accrue, the referee does elect to pull the match back to that earlier infringement. Damien Sekenis down under what was a pretty firm challenge, it must be said. And this is almost in exactly the same spot that we saw Dom Costanzo send his early free kick effort into orbit. Can Marco Jesic get the radar in a little better? It is Marco Jesic, and the radar is in. It's a shot on target, technically speaking, but no great shakes for Jack Kenny in the St. George goal. Early ball, a decent one. Well controlled by McNulty. Great save. The follow-up, though, is off the post. Incredible. Still alive through Roberts. And then the acrobatic attempt is out for a goal kick. A huge scare for the Stallions inside the opening 10 minutes. And it came really out of nothing. The long ball forward was brilliantly controlled by Mark McNulty, who shot on the tight angle. It was a fantastic save from Hilton to deny him, and then steaming through came Fumoto Kamada. With the goal gaping, he struck the post, and well, for a side whose attacking struggles are well documented, that is not what the doctor ordered. Fumoto Kamada, oh, that's better from him. Brilliant stuff. Now Foti marches forward. Strong challenge comes through from Lenaric. All legal in the eyes of the referee. Turning cleverly was True, and Kaio de Godoy was buying everything that the Marconi winger was selling. And there were heads in hands in every direction watching the replay of that earlier chance. Fumoto Kamada, who has already found the net this season, really should have scored. Jesic, he hits the deck. It's been an incident-filled game, this one so far. Perhaps that's not much in the way of a surprise, given their most recent meeting last season here at the Palace in the back end of the year, which Marconi did emerge victorious 2-1, but ended the game with 9 men. Costanzo's delivery bounces into a tricky area for Kenny. It's a scramble. It's the opening goal, or is it? The flag comes up to deny James Bayliss the game's opening goal. And what would have been for him a first goal in Marconi colours. Just bounced it. You sympathise with Jack Kenny in those sort of moments. It bounced at a really difficult height. The flat delivery from Dom Costanzo. Well, after a pretty solid in terms of physicality, but maybe so in terms of attacking chances opening 10. This game has sprung to life in a matter of minutes. St. George hit the post, and Marconi have the opening goal disallowed for offside. It's Nathan Roberts, who was down on the deck receiving treatment. Manny Spanidakis hoping that there are no other untimely injuries for his side. Of course, we mentioned the absence of Solomon John Monaghan Viker. I believe it's an ankle injury, and that he sustained last week in the derby. Quite a nasty one. Saw him walking around Marconi Stadium in crutches earlier. Or on crutches. As True doesn't really catch that one. Plenty to like about what Marconi are doing between the penalty boxes so far this evening, but still a bit askew in the front third. Of course, not at full strength in that attacking complement, as we mentioned. No Franco Maya. Carl Chimenti, of course, absent too, but still plenty of quality up there. Goal scorer extraordinaire in Marco Jesic, and Damien Sekenis has had a bright start to life. Still a big hole to fill from last season, of course, in James Temelkovski. McNulty worked under the ball by Mlinaric, all legal in the eyes of the referee. And it's a referee who's just managed to get in the way of the action there, much to the displeasure of Damien Sekenis. Griffiths. Tyron Burney. Two players who join the reigning champions for their title defence. I'm hoping that they can taste similar success. Brandon Vella will take the throw. Absolute living legend of Marconi, Brandon Vella. He's coming up on the... I'll hold that thought for a moment as the cross is driven in and forced away by Caio de Godoy. We'll try again. Or will they? Cut out nicely by Paolo Mitri. And St. George are released on the far side nicely. Kamada. Short for Roberts. It's Brody Clarkson. Marconi have got their numbers back and covering well here. And able to force the stoppage and allow Costanzo to turn and run and, well, run into the brick wall. It was Noah Ovens that time. Poor pass through the midfield lines, though. Bayless turns away from trouble. Over to Daniel. Costanzo nearly poked it through to the advantage of a teammate, but nothing doing. That 1-0 win for Marconi last week does on the face of it look like a situation in which they scraped by, but as Jesic prods it on, and Kenny's courageously through to collect the loose ball in the face of the advancing Damien Sekenis. They did only find one goal, and it was helped in by a Wanderers defender last week, but maybe deceptive in the sense that it probably should have been more. Tristan Vidakovic making another number of good saves and a couple of chances that Marconi just spurned in their own right. I do get the feeling that there are more goals to come from this side. And there's still 21 rounds left after this. Invariably, there will be more goals to come. It's just a matter of how many. I expect there are quite a few more. And Marconi get it together. You could probably argue, though, that the mark of a champion team is getting wins when they're not at their best. And they haven't been tearing the house down. You'd think I might be talking about a team who had a couple of losses to their name, but they are still 5 wins, 3 draws, 0 defeats in the opening phases of 2025. Long throw. This is the intended head. Clarkson back to Kaio Degaroy, who is St George's leading goal scorer so far in 2025. It's not often you say that about a centre-back. It's not been often in his career that you've said that about Kaio Degaroy. His first full season at St George City, having crossed the Derby divide partway through 2024. Long ball turns on a bit of a foot race and it breaks the way of Marconi, and the shot is off the post from Dom Costanzo. Well, the St George City defence caught it 6s and 7s, and Dom Costanzo nearly took full advantage. Plenty of goalmouth entertainment now in the opening 20. 2 shots off the post, a goal ruled out for offside, and yet we remain locked at a 0-0 scoreline. It's not in their 4 top flight meetings been a game that's been traditionally laden with goals. Damien Sekenis looking to change that as he challenges Nathan Grimaldi. And eventually his harassing and haranguing is enough to force the turnover by way of a Marconi corner. Just the 13 goals scored across 4 games in this fixture, but if there is a time where one is going to arrive, you probably bet on it being in the first half. 8 of those 13 coming in the opening stanza. Head-to-head locked at 2 wins apiece. Marconi looking to change that with a victory that would send them at least temporarily top of the table. Costanzo's corner is into the side netting. Still getting the eye in Dom Costanzo tonight. Degaroy. Breaks by fortune to Nathan Roberts, and it's a little bit ugly between he and Griffiths. No boil over in the end. Mitri wants to take it quickly and does. Grimaldi tried to pick the gap to feed Mark McNulty. Been a curious start to life for the 32-year-old Scotsman Mark McNulty. Since signing for St George. His quality has certainly been there, but just hasn't found the goals with as much regularity as he would have liked. Hasn't scored since the opening day of the season. Kamada gets to the byline, and the cross is a poor one, but spilled by Hilton. That's across the face, to no real benefit. Mitri looking to bend it. And now Costanzo will clear with True over his shoulder. A willing battle so far, and that was a willing challenge from Anton Mlinaric. And in kind from Jesse Foti. And so while they've been arguably the nippier of the two sides so far, St. George, they now get one back in the opposite direction. A chance to see what they can do from a set-piece situation. Been particularly threatening from corners this season, but how will they do from a central free kick? Well, we won't know. They'll take it short, and Mitri looks to fire. And it's pumped away by James Bayliss. He's coming close to matching his entire tally of games from last season after an injury on his Marconi debut last season. Came back with a vengeance, though, when he did eventually return. 11 consecutive appearances, but sure the goal for him will be just to play consistent football this season. Kamada. Well, that's a nice pass, well disguised for McNulty. And back to Roberts. Roberts the ball into the middle. It's a good one! And it produces the opening goal. A delightful piece of play from St. George City. And it is atonement for an earlier sin for Moto Kamada, who hit the post when he should have scored to open the scoring. Makes good a matter of minutes later. And it was such a good patch of play to make it a reality that started with Fumoto Kamada. It was his ball forward to Mark McNulty. He continued his run into the box and tapped it past Hilton. A really nice goal from Manny Spanidakis' side. He has looked the most threatening of the St. George players this evening. And Marconi find themselves behind. And all of a sudden, you'd think a little less about the chance to go top tonight and start thinking a little more about keeping the undefeated streak alive. We were beaten by St. George in their last meeting in 2024. Opportunity to answer back from this free kick. They won't, though. Away by Askew. And it's a firm challenge that's felled Nathan Roberts. And this is a position that Manny Spanidakis will be ever so pleased to be in. Because they have only 2 wins to their name this season in St. George City. They've been much better defending a lead and defending from in front than trying to chase down a deficit. Only coughed up a lead once this season. Or rather, once to lose. That was against Manly a couple of weeks ago. Rockdale fought back for a draw on the opening day, but lost all 4 games in which they've conceded first. And they're looking odds-on to add more, as that is a corner for them to work with. And a third goal of the season from Fumoto Kamada. I've seen him score some very, very pretty goals, particularly that one earlier a few weeks ago when they went down against Manly. Set himself a target of 10 this year on the club social media. Hasn't been a regular scorer in previous seasons, but he's 3/10 of the way there. As the corner comes in, Godoy rises. Marconi heads first to the football. Griffiths. You can see what he was trying to do, clear that one into a St George body to earn his side a pressure relieving goal kick, because they are under the cosh. A fraction at the moment. Burney drops it into space for Bayless. An advantage allowed to accrue. Sekenis for True. Knocked away by Kaya de Godoy. It can be a funny game sometimes, football. It's that opener through Fumoto Kamada has just completely knocked the wind out of Marconi's sails. And it came at the time where, of any point in this game, St George were looking most on the back foot, having just handed the ball to Dom Costanzo a few minutes earlier to allow him to hit the post. Kenny plays it short, and Ovens nearly turned into trouble. Lenaric was composed. Costanzo, or rather Jesic, my apologies. You can hear the commands being issued by both coaches. This would be quite a result for Manny Spanidakis, who returned to go back out on his own this season and return to St George, having worked under Peter Sekenis as an assistant last season. Enough to return to the Palace and leave with all 3 points. Great story in the dugout for the boys from Penshurst Park this season. Manny, of course, coaching alongside his son, James, himself a former St George City player. Bayless spins it in nicely. It's allowed to bounce, and Askew, in the end, can just comfortably nod that one back to Jack Kenny. He's not had a lot to do since St George found their way into the lead. George Daniel just watches that one out of play. Godoy read that one well. Forward in the direction of McNulty, who scraps hard just to stop it from going out for a goal kick. So at least now in this position, St George can attempt to lock the reigning champions into this little corner of the pitch. Over the head of Jesic and out off the midriff of Dakota Askew. Former Apia boy Dakota Askew, no stranger to big games against the Stallions. Sekenis is stopped in his tracks by Nathan Grimaldi, who eventually lost out to the weight of numbers. Sekenis and Costanzo closed from either direction. Bayless. Marconi trying to flip the field and do it quickly. Bernie. Back to Bayless. Griffiths inside for Bayless. Pumped away by Kaya de Godoy, who is racking up the clearances so far in this game. Costanzo's early ball is all the way out. So they're going to find a route back into this contest. They really need Dom Costanzo to get the eye back in. Still yet to register a goal or an assist this season, Dom Costanzo. This was out for the first 3 rounds of the season. Making his return at the tail end of the opening month. He's had 14 goal contributions or more in all 3 of his previous seasons for Marconi. So you always expect a goal or an assist for Marconi's number 6 is a matter of when and not if. So Kenny to bring us back into play with a goal kick. McNulty contests forlornly, and the spillage falls nicely for Marko Jesic. Across to Costanzo. Plenty of numbers behind the ball in red. It's Grimaldi who's able to rid the danger. Clarkson really turned into trouble. Hands off the back of the head of McNulty. Now True, the space opens up for Jake True. It's a fantastic block by Noah Ovens. I'm not sure what was happening in the St. George backline there. They parted like the Red Sea to allow Jake True to have a pop on goal, but Noah Ovens, the young defender, in fantastically to block. It's no surprise that his teammates got around him with some enthusiasm there. Costanzo's ball in, headed away just in front of the line. It's Grimaldi who went down, and now to Godoy and Sekenis having a bit of a set to. Bit of sorting out for the referee to do here. Some mending of fences as de Godoy and Sekenis separate. And St. George City are just 10 minutes away, stoppage time notwithstanding, from a half-time lead against the reigning champions. And given the run into this game that they have had, I don't think many would have been anticipating it. Fumoto Kamada's goal, the difference. Tyron Burney. It's a hidden hoper for Sekenis, and it falls perfectly into the lap of the number 17. De Godoy had to be alert and touches it out for another Marconi corner. So he's going to make his way into the penalty area. Damien Sekenis for this James Bayless corner. In come the centre-backs as it's a bit of a trick play at the top of the box. Dom Costanzo deflected. It took a couple of touches, and in the end it is Simple act of diving down and collecting for Jack Kenny. Not been afraid, Peter Sekenis' side so far, to switch up the corner routines. The set piece plays, go for something a little different. Hasn't exactly worked out for them so far, though. As they look to, and in the context of this game, now desperately need to add to, by their standards, pretty paltry sum of 11 goals scored this season. Flicked on by McNulty. Contesting well, Jesse Foti, but loses out to the multitude of Matsuri Blue in and around him. Griffiths. Lenaric. What a centre-back pairing they have proved to be so far. Bayliss. Back to Griffiths. Bernie drops it over the top nicely for Marko Jesic. Tries to swing it back inside for True. Need to stretch as much as he possibly could, Marko Jesic, to make that happen. Oh, well done, Nathan Roberts. McNulty further afield, and the ball put into his path. He's round the keeper, Mark McNulty. And he's just got that one all wrong, unfortunately, in the end for the Scotsman. He did everything perfect up to the finish. Made the great run for Nathan Roberts to service. Beat Hilton in the foot race, went round the keeper and just maybe took himself a little too wide with the touch. He was always going to be up against it to score from there with two Marconi defenders in the way. It does go some way to explaining why Mark McNulty has only managed one goal in his life in New South Wales so far. Hasn't necessarily been a exceedingly regular goal scorer across his career. A well-travelled one that's featured stints with the likes of Sheffield United, Portsmouth, Reading, Hibs, where he was actually quite a potent scorer. He's a striker who also likes to provide. As the space opens up nicely for Brodie Clarkson. Just didn't quite catch that one in the way he would have hoped. Just have 3 assists, Mark McNulty, to go with that one goal. And as I was saying, somebody who likes to put the attacking moves together as much as finish them off. He hasn't actually scored more than 5 goals in a league season since 2020, so maybe unfair to say that he's not delivering on what's been hoped. As Kenny has to double back to avoid handling that one outside the area. Contested in vain by Dakota Askew. As we are inside the final 5 minutes of the first half. Is there an opportunity for the Marconi Stallions to find a first half goal? It is now 9 of 14 in this fixture that have been scored inside the first half. The 2 goals that ultimately won it for Marconi in the last half, you guessed it, both in the opening 45. Right now, though, St. George arguably looking the most likely, though not with balls like that from Nathan Roberts. True, he turned into trouble, and Mitri was there to steal the ball momentarily off James Bayliss. But Marconi cannot just cannot get it going at the moment. Roberts leading his defenders on a merry dance and launching it over the top where Dakota Askew was free as a bird. It is Askew. It's blocked nicely. Once again by Anton Manaric. They don't call him the Warden for no reason at the Palace. Ball sent forward by McNulty in search of Jesse Foti. Back with Askew. It's a blind pass from Costanzo. Easy pickings for this City back four. Oh, well controlled. Good stuff by Damien Sekenis. Jesic. And now True, who's wide, but not a lot of options in the middle. So he heads to the opposite wing where Costanzo hits the deck. And the whistle doesn't arrive, so Costanzo tries to work it through a cul-de-sac of St. George City players. And manages to win a corner. It's proved a tall task getting these ones right so far tonight. If they want to head into the sheds level, Marconi, they need that to change. On the right boot of Dominic Costanzo. This one's all the way to the back, headed back in on goal. And, oh, it's nearly squeaked in. It's chaos! But it doesn't matter. The reigning champions find a way. And it is a set piece that produces what they desire. Damien Sekenis turning home. A really scrappy situation. It's not like the warning signs hadn't been there in those sort of moments for St. George. And it is another first half goal in this fixture. And Damien Sekenis is the man who gets it done. And Manny Spanidakis will, to put it lightly, not be best pleased. St. George finding themselves in recent weeks out of form, but in a position of ascendancy against one of the two remaining undefeated sides, one of the top two sides so far in season 2025. Through a piece of quality play, only to find themselves heading into the sheds at level pegging. And it has to be said, a couple of minutes ago, it didn't look like a likely outcome. St. George City led by a goal to nil for a good half hour, courtesy of a cracking team goal finished off by Fumoto Kamada. And they had really unsettled the Stallions to that point. Who were struggling to really get into gear. But as is so often the case, the lifeline, the leveller, arrives at the boot of Dom Costanzo. It was his corner that sent off some really gruesome scenes in the St. George penalty area. Only for Damien Sekenis to bundle the ball home and leave us as we were at the start of the game. It's level here at Marconi Stadium, but so much still to play for on the other side of this break. Marconi looking to turn a 1-0 deficit into a lead. That will take them top of the NPL New South Wales table for tonight. Whether or not they will do it, that's what we'll find out on the other side of the break. But here in Bosley Park, the halftime score, Marconi Stallions 1, St. George City 1. Well, the tones of Sirius by the Alan Parsons Project ringing out across the Palace. A fitting tune for the tension that sits with both sides of this contest and their fans heading in to the second half. 45 minutes to play, all to play for between the reigning champions Marconi and St George City here in Bosley Park. It was a struggling St George side who headed into this game with one win in their last 5 and found themselves into, well, in the eyes of any pre-game punter, a bit of a surprise lead through a quality team goal that was both started and finished off on the 25th minute by Fumoto Kamada. And it left Peter Sekenis' side with a fair bit of work to do. And to be quite honest with you, it was work that they weren't doing the best job of getting done for the better part of 20 or so minutes in the first half. They toiled forlornly as they played nice football between the penalty boxes but couldn't really make it stick in the final third. Only to, as championship sides come to do, find a way any way they can. And it was Damien Sekenis right before the break who found that way, scrambling home a pretty ugly sequence in the St George defensive penalty box. That puts us into the situation where we currently sit at level pegging in the second half. This game has never been drawn in NPL New South Wales. Of course, just the 4 meetings between these two sides since St George's promotion to the top flight. And I dare say both sides will be hoping that that can stay that way. They've got a good chunk of time in which to do that. Ball forward to Costanzo, well judged by Noah Ovens. Only one, just the once at Marconi Stadium this season. The Stallions last week. And St George have only won here once as well. Oh, that's all time though, 770 days ago. Back in the 2023 season. Both Petratos brothers scoring in a 3-2 win as Costanzo tries to cut it inside for Jesic. Nothing doing. And interesting to note that Manny Spanadakis, who did make a couple of halftime changes in the St George derby last week, has done so again 7 days later. As the halftime interval has allowed him to bring Zach Hamoud off the bench for a 5th appearance of the season. And by my reckoning, it looks to be in place of the Scotsman, Mark McNulty. Oh, clever back heel from Sekenis. Jesic was twisting and turning. Now a chance for Hamoud. He wins the free kick, and you would have to imagine, with the greatest respect to Zach Hamoud, that well, if Mark McNulty is coming off at half-time, he didn't have his best half, but he was instrumental in helping to string together some of St George's best moves in the first 45. And it might have been possibly something that is injury enforced, so chance for Zach Hamoud to show what he can do. The pressure is Well, the pressure's not off St George. They are, of course, sitting in 13th going into this game. Only won one of their last 5 games, only won 2 all season. But in the context of this fixture at the Palace, all the onus really is on the reigning champions to take the bull by the horns. And they've started this second half with plenty of energy, as De Godoy manages to get his body in the way of the ball and Damien Sekenis. And Sekenis, in his enthusiasm to retrieve it, has just been a fraction overzealous. The 3rd goal of the season for Damien Sekenis, right at the end of the first half, to bring us to where we are now, level pegging. Former Central Coast Mariners youth product. He's played every minute of this season so far. Knocked away by Askew. George Daniel with the throw. Mlinaric puts it inside for his centre-back partner, Lockie Griffiths, as Marconi changed the locus of the attack. Good ball through the lines. True clips it in delicately, but inaccurately. Easy pickings for Dakota Askew, who continues his run as Jesse Foti marches forward and glides through the middle of the park. Kamada, the opening goal scorer, looking to dazzle the defence once again. Away by Mlinaric, and the spillage falls. And legally won back in the eyes of the referee off the feet of Palomitri for Moto Kamada. Driving this way and that. He has been such a handful for this Marconi defence. Effervescent presence down the left flank. Be forgiven for, at times, not being totally sure whether he was playing left wing, left wing back, or a combination of all three, as Costanzo goes to ground. Cut out by Daniel. Bayless. It's been a frenetic first 8 minutes of the second half, even if it doesn't have much in the way of goalmouth chances to bring to us as yet, as Burney drives forward. Still going, Tyron Burney. And away by Nathan Grimaldi, who is a former Marconi Junior. He's actually never lost to Marconi in his senior seasons in NPL New South Wales. Formerly of the Sutherland Sharks, which is a journey to which many of these St George players can lay claim to. That's where he was before his stint on the Hunter with the Newcastle Jets. Two wins, one draw, 0 defeats against the Stallions in his time in a Sutherland shirt. Mlinaric. Daniel. Marconi numbers starting to accrue on the left flank. Costanzo. darts the eyes up and finds a ball in field for Marko Jesic. Vela. True's cross, away by Askew. It's a bit of a half-field game at the moment. Bayless. Sekenis dropping off the front line. Mlinaric tries to fire it in for Jesic. It's not the best moment from Marko Jesic in Stallions game 259. Costanzo. Noah Ovens blocks it again. He's been quite impressive in defence, has the youngster. And now Jesse Foti trying to poke it forward to Hamoud. Griffiths wins it back well. And Askew able to just take it off the toes of Damien Sekenis. Tyron Burney. True was just caught on his haunches there. Fumoto Kamada could only stab it out for a throw. And he wins the battle again. Hamoud does well with back to goal. And now the ball in, side-footed away emphatically by Nathan Grimaldi. Came to Godoy. Jake True able to keep it away from the advances of the 26-year-old defender. Costanzo. It's been an utterly dominant start to the second phase from Marconi where possession is concerned. It's a hopeful ball. Can't find Sekenis. Jesse Foti is able to win a throw. Scored his first ever NPL goal here at the Palace for, you guessed it, Sutherland Sharks back in March 2023. Askew with a pressure-relieving switch, and this could be trouble for the Stallions' defence if they're not careful here. Kamada, again, is the man who catches them out. Askew. Hamoud makes the run. Askew checks inside. Dakota Askew, well blocked. Clarkson. Back to Askew. And now Jesse Foti. One way, then the other. Jesse Foti's cross, just lacking conviction. And helped out by Mlinaric. For all the verve and vigour of the first 15 minutes of this second half, still waiting for the first meaningful goal-bound chance. You get the sense that both of these two sides are fired up to make something happen. This hasn't dropped for them as yet. Maybe Jake True can have something to say about that as he battles with Kaio de Godoy. Askew has been really good in this second half so far. Kept Dom Costanzo pretty quiet. Hamoud to the deck. No whistle from the referee. And now Costanzo can carry the ball in the opposite direction with a little more space to work with. Only momentarily. Well won back by Mitri. Jesse Foti. Hamoud the man in the middle. Foti will head to the byline and fashion a cross in. But it's nodded away by Tyron Burney. Those counter-attacking breaks are starting to open up for St George, but it's not quite the sufficient numbers with which to attack them as yet. in this game, Marconi, they're going to have to do something that they haven't been able to do all too regularly as yet. And that is score 2 goals in a game. 5 of their 8 games so far this season, they've scored just 1 goal. Going on to win 2 and draw 3 of those. They need to change that, as Kamada couldn't curl across back in time to reach Zach Hamoud. It's a hopeful ball, and asking a little bit too much of both Damien Sekenis and the size of the pitch here at Marconi. Which it's no surprise the ball has been so slick on the surface in this second half. It was subject, the Palace, not just to a pre-match, but a half-time watering as well, which you don't often see. Certainly palatial treatment for the pitch, as well as for the players, as Grimaldi takes the sting out of that Marconi attack with a header back to Jack Kenny. Jesse Foti being urged to gamble, and gamble he does. Hamoud went in strongly, but Mlinaric, he's such a cool customer in the centre of defence. Very rarely looks bothered. Since arriving from the Oakley Cannons in Victoria. As True is released down the right. And looking to get past his marker and doing so and floating it in, but not to the advantage of a teammate. It's been a couple of crosses like that for Jake True tonight. The idea is correct, but the accuracy, the execution is not quite matching the intent. Scores around the ground. It's just the one other game to contend with this one tonight. Blacktown City leading at 1-0 against the Sutherland Sharks. NWO Spirit, a massive match against Rockdale tomorrow. You would imagine there'd be quite a few in the Spirit camp watching on at this one, and quietly be very pleased if the game were to end one apiece. So they could extend their lead atop the NPL New South Wales table to 4 points, but of course beating Rockdale by no means a sure thing. Seeing a bit of activity over on that Marconi bench. Wondering if there might be a first Stallion substitution of the half to come shortly, but in the meantime we turn our attention to this Costanzo free kick, which is headed up towards the top of the box and struck beautifully! Oh, what a sensational goal! Anton Mlinaric scores an absolute screamer. And out of absolutely nowhere, and in some style, the reigning champions are back on top. Not just in this game, but on the table as well. And they have an absolute Anton Mlinaric missile to thank for it. He struck that so sweetly on the top of the box. Well, Jack Kenny, March's goalkeeper of the month, could do absolutely diddly squat about that one. A fantastic first of the season from the central defender. And isn't that a goal that the Stallions needed? And it is one that takes the wind out of the sails for St. George City. That familiar feeling of being behind in a game again. Having coughed up a lead for the third time already this season. bigger response required now because they haven't been scoring goals with regularity in Marconi. They have been keeping them out pretty easily. No fourth clean sheet of the season tonight, but Fumoto Kamada's first half goal, just the 6th they've conceded this year. So I expect this defence to prove tricky to breach as Mlinaric onto the floor. You can see the signalling from the referee that Nathan Grimaldi won the ball. Mitri, disguised pass, too hot to handle for Zach Hamoud as across with some interest comes Nathan Roberts, and Hilton took exception, and this game has gone from bad to worse for St George. Nathan Roberts coming together with James Hilton, and the referee did not think twice. A red card for St George's number 7. Well, what has happened between James Hilton and Nathan Roberts there? Oh, you could just see it was faint, but it was there. It was a little headbutt, I believe, from Nathan Roberts to the face of James Hilton, and it doesn't matter how forceful they are. That is a red card every day of the week. And Manny Spanidakis will not be best pleased about that one. It was, to put it bluntly, needless from Nathan Roberts, who has actually played pretty well up until this point. He came in hot on Hilton. Hilton closed in, and it was just a classic case of head loss from Nathan Roberts. Not what St George City needed. Marconi have gone from slightly nervous to sitting very pretty in this game, and maybe a big chance now for them to add a few more goals to the tally. Sekenis wins a corner. And it's the second time in as many meetings to Bosley Park, or meetings at Marconi Stadium, I should say, that St George City will end the night without the full complement of 11. They were down to 9 when they came here at the end of last season. Solomon John Monahan-Viker and Matt Karamilevsky both sent off. Costanzo's corner to the back post and away by St George City. And the bouncing ball nearly breaks the way of Mlinaric. Eventually flag up from the assistant referee. This game has just flipped on its head. It's gone from a slightly timid performance from the reigning champions, 1-1 at the break with a struggling St George, to a comeback befitting of champions from 1-0 down to lead 2-1. A goal down and a man down, St George. A good thing for them, depending on your persuasion, that there is still 22 minutes and stoppage time left in this game, and as it currently stands, they would only need 1 goal to try and eke out a point at least, but the space is starting to open up for the Stallions, who march forward here, but Dakota Askew able to get his challenge correct. And now Tyron Burney, who went on that marauding run, has got to double back quickly because Fumoto Kamada is trying to exploit the space that he leaves vacant. Hamoud keeps it rid of the snapping heels of James Bayless, or who was snapping at his heels, I should say. Noah Ovens drives inside. Oh, and the ball was there for Zach Hamoud. Found himself in a little pocket of open space in between the lines. Central defender in number 17, not able to pick him out. When you're a goal down and a man down, those are the kind of opportunities you can't really afford to let slip. Cody Clarkson thwarted by the midfield line of Marconi. Ovens. Dakota Askew. If anyone's going to do it for St. George City, their fullbacks are looking the most likely. Kamada and Dakota Askew. They scored twice against Marconi before Dakota Askew. As inside it goes for Palomitri. You could see the idea brewing in his mind, trying to thread the needle for Zach Hamoud. Well, not having any shots of his own has certainly given the Marconi defence a little bit to think about with his energy and runs in behind. As that substitution we mooted earlier looks as though it's going to come to fruition now. Marconi's first of the night, enacted by Damien Sekenis, is going to bring an end to play for Dom Costanzo. And replacing him, a man who Damien Sekenis will be hoping for much of the same as he's been able to deliver in recent weeks off the bench in Mate Bushek. 2 goals already this season. Both of them coming off the pine, including an absolute scorcher of a goal in the local derby with Sydney United. If he could do that again, I'm sure there'll be many at Marconi Stadium leaving very happy. He's got some ground to cover, though, if he wants to match that earlier effort from Anton Mlinaric. St. George set piece. Hilton watches it all the way. You have to wonder how much of an appetite, given their defensive prowess, Marconi will have for really piling on the goals. Or at what point, if they don't pile on the goals, will they become content with trying to defend a 1-goal advantage? As the substitute Mate Bushek gives chase. Oh, a delightful turn from Brody Clarkson. That's opened up the space for St. George. Dakota Askew. Jesse Foti. Delicate pass from Askew. Clarkson. And now Palomitri fires it into the feet of Hamoud, and that is where the attack ends. You can see his teammates handing out some constructive criticism to the youngster. Still just 22 years old. Product of the St. George Academy. He's come from the under-16s all the way through to the first grade level. Looks as though Manny Spanidakis will make a double change shortly as St. George look to chase this game against the odds. Mlinaric. Bayless with time and space to turn. Opts for the short and safe option of Griffith. Tyrone Burney. Mate Busick. Checks inside, clips it over the top for Burney. Body's in the way from a St. George perspective, and Dogodoy Up the line for Kamada, who wants to get going quickly, but the return ball, he dazzled us with his earlier turn a minute ago, Brodie Clarkson. He couldn't quite make the magic happen from the passing sequence there, as the double sub comes through from Manny Spanidakis, Palomitri, and well, perhaps surprisingly, Dakota Askew is the latter of the two players to leave the field of play. Both like-for-like replacements in the form of Matthew Wabi and Portuguese midfielder Gonçalo Agrelos. So a chance for Matthew Wabi to show what he can do off the bench. One of the new signings this season from Rockdale. Getting a proper taste of first-team football this season. Agrelos is an intriguing one, signed from the Slovenian first tier, former Sporting Club de Portugal Junior. Played a couple of Primeira Liga games as well. Already one goal to his name. Manny Spanidakis will be hoping that that tally can be doubled very quickly. As we enter the final 15 minutes, the second half that has flown by owing to the energy of both of these sides out of the break. A cracking go-ahead goal from Anton Mlinaric and a quizzical red card from Nathan Roberts. It's had something for everyone this game. Bayless has hit the turf in some discomfort. The referee quick to oblige with the whistle. I'm pretty sure Brodie Clarkson has gone into the book as a result of that challenge. So the medical treatment is going to come through here for James Bayless. And in fact, it was Kaio De Godoy who was the man who received the yellow card. Looks as though James Bayless will be all good to continue, and in the absence of Dom Costanzo, may well be straight back onto his feet and straight into set-piece duties. And indeed he will. Two arms aloft for James Bayless, whose delivery is a decent one, but repelled by Grimaldi, thumped away by Agrelos. And where's this one landing? Right in the grandstand from Kaio De Godoy. Not exactly Jogo Bonita, that sequence of clearance on clearance on clearance on clearance. Yeah, that's the beauty of the NPL. You get some of the best football you've ever seen, and you get some other stuff too. There's no doubt we've got some quality tonight, thanks to quality, what is set to be winning goal for Anton Mlinaric, which, if this result is to hold, would set us up very, very nicely indeed for a potential top-of-the-table clash next week between Marconi and NWS Spirit out at the Arctic Circle next Saturday. They've got cup concerns before that, though, do Marconi. Tuesday night, travel to face Bankstown City. Be hoping to make a deeper cup run this year. Been knocked out early doors by RPL last season. Kenny clears for distance. Foti the furthest forward, and the second ball nearly broke for Hamoud. Griffiths kept his cool. Daniel to Brandon Vella. And over the top for Jesic. They've got 4-on-3 here, and it's a good switch, but Kenny comes across quickly to deny the advance of Mate Busek. Noah Ovens into the final 10 at Marconi Stadium. And the curler is hopeful from Gonzalo Agrelos. I think the effects mic allowed you to hear some of the enthusiastic feedback from his teammates at that decision to shoot. And is this a sign of Marconi starting to conserve and get comfortable with the idea of trying to stifle St George's attempts at an equaliser and maybe nick one to seal it on the break? I wonder. Only time will tell, of course. Only ever seen one goal in the final 15 minutes of this fixture in the NPL. It was scored by St George. Costa Petrados in the 85th minute. Last meeting, as that header is a wayward one. No threat to the goal of James Hilton, who tonight makes his 50th NPL appearance for Marconi. His 50th consecutive appearance. Such a quality keeper since making a step up to first grade. As a 13th minute sub for Jack Gibson back in 2023. As the opportunity might be on here for Sir Kenneth. Across for True, whose first touch took him a fraction wide. True's cross offline. Goal kick to come from Jack Kenny. Still locked at 1-0 with 7 minutes to play out at Landon Stadium. Blacktown leading Sutherland Sharks. As it's across to Fumoto Kamada. Clarkson. Grimaldi. He's getting forward, the central defender. Kamada. They want the ball at his feet. You can see why. Although not with that pass or with that foul, as play continues. And Marconi counter. It's Mate Busek marching forward. We know what he can do in these situations, but thwarted nicely by Noah Ovens. Brandon Vella. George Daniel. To Vella. Found nicely by Jesic. Oh, he wanted to get that flick through to Busek. Not to be. They got it in them to find a game-sealing third, though they won't with a pass like that. And so we're going to see a substitution for either side here at this break. Looks like Miloslav Popovic, one of the two players who will enter the field. Bring you confirmation of that shortly. is indeed Miloslav Popovic on in place of Jake True. Oh my goodness. That could have been an absolute calamity for Jack Kenny. Damien Sekenis closed out of the blind side like the Grim Reaper there, and Jack Kenny just cleared in hope, and is a very lucky boy that that one didn't rebound its way into the back of the net. So here is Miloslav Popovic. St. George did make their subs as well. William Kunis is in to the fray as Jesic clips it into the middle. Matthew Wabi had to just pump that one out of danger. Marconi just turning the screw here a little. Bernie. And just not quite working in the way that Tyrone Bernie would have hoped. Bit of flying start to life for him since signing from Blacktown. Fullback. Short goal kick. Forced Wabi to double back, and he turned into trouble. Jesic, really clever stuff. And a good ball forward to Miloslav Popovic. Options in the middle, or he could go it alone. The impact sub. Popovic drives it into the penalty area, but there's no blue shirt to knock it home. Sekenis. Denied forward passage by Kayo Dugadoy. Advantage played by the referee. Now Matthew Wabi. The switch of play, a decent one. Zach Hamoud was there. Marconi were awaiting a flag that never arrived. Luckily for them, their defense does enough. Busek. Oh, great ball. Through to Marko Jesic, and now it's Sekenis! It's the sealer for the reigning champions, and it's Damien Sekenis at the double. That's how quickly a patch of play can turn on its head. St. George City millimetres away from a massive chance to strike against the flow. And Marconi with the man advantage carried up the opposite end, and in a handful of passes have the ball in the back of the net. A great pass from Marko Jesic to release Damien Sekenis, who in the space of 87 minutes in Bosley Park has doubled his seasonal tally. 2 goals going into this game, and now 4 on the night. Well, 4 for the season, 2 on the night. And going some way to fill that void vacated at the top of the attack by James Temelkovski. Hamoud. Good dribble from the St. George defender. And the final change enacted by Manny Spanadakis. Kai Kamakura, the former Sydney FC youth player, enters in place, I believe, of Fumoto Kamada. Grimaldi. Stoppage time approaching at the Palace. And just minutes now standing between Marconi and a place at the summit of the NPL New South Wales table. Busek in the corner. And manages to get clear and cross it in invitingly. Sekenis. No wonder he was attacking that one with real enthusiasm. He's on the hat-trick. look to get his way on the end of this corner. As it's going to be an extra 4 minutes added on to what's been a pretty entertaining game here in Bosley Park, where Marconi have managed to come back from a goal down. The corner is high and not particularly handsome. Popovic can at least earn a throw. And how important, Damien Sekenis' second goal was great to seal this contest, but you can't help but think how important his first was right before the break, because it came at a time in this game where, well, not only were they second best on the score sheet, Marconi, but they were probably second best in the game as well. After St. George took the lead through Fumoto Kamada. That scrappy goal, just willing it home, so important, as Popovic was carelessly caught offside there. Peter Sekenis makes his final substitution of the night. Julian Monge into midfield. Replacing Brandon Vella. Marconi's longest serving player. Joined as a 14-year-old, made his senior debut on the 31st of May 2015 when he was 16. He's been at Marconi longer than St. George City have existed as a club. Very loyal servant. He's going to be very happy with 3 points for his beloved side this evening. Degadoy has it taken off his toes. Jesic couldn't thread the needle, but it'll fall back to Jesic, who has a snapshot. Nothing doing. St. George looked to break. Grimaldi on a one-man mission and legged by Jesic. I think he's actually lost his boot in the process. His teammates unperturbed as they take the free kick while the central defender has one shoe on. Luckily, he must have laceless ones because he got that back on exceedingly quickly. Strong challenge. Grimaldi is marching forward. He flew in on Jesic. And you could see that brewing. Grimaldi was fuming in the lead up to that challenge. He's lost his head a little bit there, it has to be said. And while you could hear the central defender protesting that he did not touch Marco Jesic, if he did, that would have been massive trouble for the centre-back. You cannot begrudge, given the force with which Nathan Grimaldi came steaming in, Marco Jesic for taking some serious exception to that challenge. Very, very, very close to a repeat of history. And St. George ending the night at the Palace with 9 men again. It's still going on between Marco Jesic and Nathan Grimaldi. He continues to protest his case that, well, I never touched you. I missed the ball and the player, but a man in Marco Jesic's position, you can understand why he doesn't quite agree with that assessment. It's all going to be a moot point in a matter of seconds. 4 minutes of stoppage time have elapsed. much time has the referee added on as a result of that set two? Headed up towards Popovic. And that's where it ends. Marconi, the reigning champions, top of the table for 24 hours at least. And it ends in a bit of acrimony at the Palace, but you can take nothing away from what was a champion comeback performance from Peter Sekenis' side. 1-0 they trailed after 25 minutes. Fumoto Kamada finishing off a fantastic team goal for St. George City that left the Stallions with a fair bit of work to do after a slow start. It was Damien Sekenis who found the all-important leveler before the break, and then the Stallions emerged a different team out of the second half, but they still needed a moment of quality to allow them to retake the lead. Anton Mlinaric with an absolute missile at the top of the penalty area to complete the turnaround for Marconi before, in the dying embers of this game, after Nathan Roberts had received a red card to take St. George down to 10, Damien Sekenis made his night a double and sealed the 3 points for the home side, who now sit top of the pile in NPL New South Wales. Over to you, NWS Spirit, tomorrow. All to play for in what remains of round 9, but it's all over here at Marconi Stadium. Been a pleasure to bring you the action wherever you've been tuning in from. Thanks for your company. The full-time score from Marconi Stadium: Marconi Stallions 3, St. George City 1.